so much, everyone, for coming along. Today, as I said, a great opportunity for us to really focus and kind of recognise the incredible contribution of our LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs, but also those that are kind of operating in this space. I really hope that the session can very much reflect the real kind of healthy diversity amongst some of the prime movers in the startup community here at LSE, but also to kind of really shine a spotlight, yes, the opportunities, but also the work that we must do to ensure that every single person can really turn up as their authentic selves each and every day. I want to thank the founders here that we've worked with over the last few years. They're doing an amazing job at kind of ensuring that this can be a much easier process. And really just want to kind of hand over now to some of these trailblazers. They very much created the space themselves, for themselves and for others, in an industry that I think quite clearly we'll all agree lacks those kind of diverse voices. And I know that that's something that we as universities can work a lot harder to kind of broaden that. So without further ado, I actually want to introduce the panel. I want them to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the work that they're doing in this space. Very much want this to be super interactive. I would have loved for us to be together, but it just allows for a much kind of broader and again diverse community. I think that's one of the great things that Zoom does sometimes allow for. So I'm gonna go around the Zoom room and get our four founders to introduce themselves a little bit about what they're doing currently. But please to jot down any questions or points that you have in the chat, and we'll also move around super quickly and get you guys either sharing your experiences or asking questions to this fabulous panel. So without further ado, I think I'm going to kick off with Christian. Over there, you're first in my window box, and so if you can just introduce a little bit more about yourself, what you're doing, that'd be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Sure. No, thank you for having me. Really excited to have this conversation. So I'm Christian, born and raised in London, proud LSE geography alum. I won't tell you which year, but several years ago. And since graduating from LSE, other than doing my master's at UCL, I pretty much went straight out to Hong Kong, which is where I first started to get involved in the innovation and venture space. And through that experience, coupled with various, quote, gay hats that I've been wearing across the government, corporate, startup and community circles, I started to see a gap and a lack of interlock across investment, intersectionality and innovation. And really saw that this gap was quite systemic at the market level, both economically and politically. I began working when I came back to London more closely in the venture capital space, which I do now even more so in my new role at Bain. But talking with these different LGBTQ plus founders, I realized they were having quite bad experiences with investors. There was tunnel vision in the startup world because a lot of what we do focuses on new tech or business model innovation. There's an assumption that we are all liberal, we are open-minded, but this isn't always the case in practice. And also based on the limited data that exists, which is mostly US focused, there is also a funding problem. So for example, LGBTQ plus founding companies raise 11% less capital than their non-LGBTQ plus peers. If we look within the community at an intersectional level, LBT women raise less outside capital than men as well. And there's also global studies looking at the national economic level. So all of this led me to founding iCubed Investing, which I'll put a quick link in the chat to. And essentially what we focus on is how we can queer the venture capital space. And essentially that looks at 3 C's, community, connection, and capital. So the first C is us creating an evolving founder-led space where you can meet different queer founders around the world. And we also have country-specific groups right now, London and Berlin, that we're expanding organically. And we're looking to build this with the community in mind. So if there are founders in certain cities around the world that want to set up chapters, that's great. And we also have a focus on founder reporting to try and close that gap within the UK and EMEA, because all the studies have been very US focused. That's our plan as well, and to publish a report with some industry heavyweights later in the year. The second C is connection. So this is open to all founders on the call and anyone who watches this afterwards. We have opened applications to essentially spotlight queer founders with a bespoke group of VCs, angel investors who actually care about intersectionality, and they can see the value that intersectionality brings to founders. Because we have a philosophy called Intersectional Incredibles, which essentially means if you're intersectional and a founder, you're more likely to foster innovation and creativity. And there's growing studies on this. And the very final C, then I'll stop talking, is capital. So this is where we provide strategic advice to founders on raising capital. And we also have ambitions to grow our own fund, and we're looking at certain partners in the industry to focus on this. So yeah, essentially, I guess I'm a founder for a company that focuses on founders. So that's where I'm at right now.
Thanks, Christian. That's such a proactive and positive way to start the panel. So thank you. I'm sure that Christian would be more than happy to talk to any of you or anyone that you know that might be interested in this and the work that he's doing afterwards as well. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that in a bit. Yael, you're next in my room. Yael, we've been working with for numerous years and actually is currently our in-house gender consultant. So she can tell you a little bit more about what she's been doing. But thanks so much for coming, Yael. Oh, I think you're on mute.
That is correct. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Yael. My pronouns are she and her. It's really great to be in this space. So as LJ has mentioned, I am now acting as the in-house gender advisor to LSE Generate. And this has been kind of an ongoing collaboration for almost 4 years now, I think. And I'm also the founding director of Gender Rise, which is a workplace gender consultancy with a focus on the private sector and on the startup ecosystem. So kind of doing these two things, which brilliantly interlink together. Kind of similar to what Christian was saying earlier, there's definitely some serious gaps and also lack of information around LGBTQI plus with relation to a startup, but also kind of in workplaces in general. So this is definitely something that has been one of the drivers for me to start my consultancy. Generally, Gender Rise provides training, provides policy, consultancy, and more importantly, provides strategy for companies and organizations to become gender equal, and then LGBTQI plus is part of that. And I also have specific trainings and policy and strategy work around that. I would say that my approach is to look at the gender dynamic rather than to look at the underrepresented groups. I think that oftentimes when we talk about gender, people immediately think women and immediately think LGBTQI plus, and the intersection of these things, if we are becoming a bit more, taking a bit more of a progressive approach to it. What I think is missing is to talk about men and masculinities, which are basically kind of the driving forces of these industries. So I'm much more interested in looking at the dynamics that happens within an organization, especially when we think about startups. If we can actually create kind of a balance of values and actions from the get-go and commit to gender equality from the very start, then we can create companies that then in the future don't have gender gaps, discrimination, lack of inclusion, and also benefiting from everything that diversity in general has to give. So my focus is mainly on creating really solid foundations with this gender dynamic approach in mind. A really good example of this is the gender responsive and gender sensitive code of conduct that we did with LSE Generate, which is a living, breathing action plan and vision for the hub. So yeah, more to talk about that later, I'm sure, but I'll keep it at that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Yael. I'm really super keen to kind of explore a little bit more about this and the culture within startups, and whether this kind of endemic kind of bro-grammar culture, especially in tech, how that kind of impacts the way that kind of we view the whole thing as well. So yeah, lots to explore. Jaron, over to you.
Hi everyone. Hi, I'm Jaron. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the founder of Voda. Voda is the mental wellness app for the LGBTQIA+ community. So personally, I struggled a lot with my own sexuality growing up. I'm gay. I grew up in conservative Singapore, and it took me many years before I accepted myself. And the reason I started Voda is because I didn't realize how much my anxiety with my sexuality was affecting my personal and professional lives, even after I have, come out in several phases. First came out to my family, and then came out in university, and then I realized that even at work. So after graduating from LSE in 2017, I started working in tech. I had to come out every day at work as well, and oftentimes you choose not to come out. And there is just this lingering anxiety about my sexuality that affected me in ways I did not understand. And I've been to therapy myself, and that helped me a lot with my own anxiety and my own limiting beliefs. But at the same time, therapy is very inaccessible and quite unaffordable for most people. So NHS waiting times are really long if you need to see someone. And that is, probably only if you have a diagnosable mental health disorder or illness. But for many people that have mild to mid or substantial mental health challenges, you're really unlikely to get public health access. At the same time, private therapy is also very expensive. And if you don't work in a big company that has extensive benefits, most of us are not able to afford therapy. So for me, myself, it was a privilege, and I was able to afford therapy and kind of like work on my issues and learn tools to help better manage my anxiety. But a lot of my peers are not as lucky. So this is why I'm working on Voda, to make therapy more accessible, affordable, and contextualized for queer people. I've been working on Voda for about the past 4 or 5 months now. Our programs are based on mindfulness and cognitive behavior therapy. So we've been working with a panel of 7 queer psychotherapists who identify across different sexualities, genders, and ethnicities, and we create digital therapy programs. So think of something like a Calm or a Headspace. You put headphones on, you listen to the program based on specific challenges like overcoming internalized stigma, accepting my bodies, or more general stuff like dealing with critical self-talk. So the app is currently bootstrapped, but because I built it myself, I'm able to kind of invest most of the funding into the psychotherapists that we're working with. The app is now almost ready for launch. We are launching in about a week. If you'd like to get early access and also help shape something that could help a lot of our fellow queer people, I'd love for you to sign up. So our website is voda.co, voda.co. Yeah, that's all from my end.
Thanks, Jaron, and thanks for being so honest and authentic there as well. I think we'd definitely love to share that resource with some of our founders as well. So we will make sure that the marketing queen, that is Alice, will get onto that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Quiyan, over to you with questions.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Quiyan, and I graduated from LSE Generate Study Department in 2019. And then, because as a international students, I came here also as a LGBT as a woman. I suffer from many different harassment, sexual harassment or discrimination. I also cannot find supporting network. Like when I go to some maybe LGBT organization, actually you can assess your identity, gender identity, but you also maybe face some potential racism or some systematic racism like that. So I feel I cannot fully assess my identity as a migrant, as a lesbian, as a Chinese. And I also can hear many experience from our communities. They face the similar situation, but there is no growth support them. So that's made me thinking I can do something. Like when I came to UK, I'm an activist. I organized my LGBT grassroots organization, and I also know LSE Generate. So it's I put many appointments to want to hear some advice how I can have a sustainable business models to make social impact, to support my communities, as well as like how to make this organization profitable, sustainable. And now the organization I set up is Queer China UK, and we mainly focus on several areas. One is about the music education. For example, we provide the decolonizing LGBT tour in Mandarin and Cantonese in the British Museum National Gallery. Even in LSE campus, we also have a 1-hour tour in LSE campus to introduce like suffragette histories, LGBT histories, like in the LSE. And so we provide several kind of this tour to make our community, they will hear some like family story, also interesting. And we also will add some cultural sensitivity into our tour narratives. And now because our team member, there are some people that are from East and Southeast Asia's background. They're interested in like translated tour into other languages. I think it's fine, like you can do it. And another area we focus is on the queer art. And we had like the art festivals, but mainly focus community focused art festivals. And for this festival, we would currently I'm quite passionate about it because I figure out how to become like online communities, like not just like limited in London or not limited in like physical space. And we will run like the physical festival, also like the workshop, like creative workshop. Last 2 weeks, we just run some like self-care through art making workshop, something like that. And the last one, we also provide some trainings like for the student empowerment training or the LGBT and Chinese inclusive training like for the student. Also in this LGBT History Month, we invite by some business to like give some talk, give some training, give some like toolkit to their employees. It's something like that. And we also welcome any like opportunity for cooperation or just have a casual talks.
Thank you so much, Jaron. And I've got to say, I first met you, I think maybe 3 years ago, and the courage that you had to kind of push this forward despite everything happening in the background was just absolutely phenomenal. So I've got to kind of hats off to you. Thanks so much. Just wanted to kind of throw it out to the audience. And was there anything that the four founders were talking about that you'd like to kind of pick up on? Any comments, any shared experiences that you'd like to bring to the table? Please feel free to add in the chat or just remove your microphone and mute and come on down. Or any additional points that the founders wanted to make, and if not, I'll jump in with some questions.
Hi everyone, LJ, it's Andrew here. It's great to be here, and fantastic to hear those initial personal stories and observations, and I'm just really interested. There was several things said that were really resonated, but one of the things that I was struck by was the comment around identity and whether in the startup world it almost goes. I mean, it's partly this tech bro culture, but it goes beyond that into the sense of, are we attempting to sort of breed ideal human beings who are invulnerable and perfect in every way, and can work 15-hour days and go jogging and there's a kind of perfectionism in that, and I just wondered whether that all plays into this. That's being authentic, being vulnerable, being somewhat in transition in some form or another is hard to reconcile with the kind of the sort of ideal culture we have in startups. It's an unformed thought, but I just sort of wanted to throw that out there. So
yeah, I think it's a great point, this idea that everyone needs to kind of almost fit into this collective mold, and you get a kind of a stereotype out in San Francisco. Everyone wears Allbirds trainers and has to be doing this. We love Allbirds. It's a Generate business, so not dissing that. But this kind of, this ideal, does it mean that everything is quite one-dimensional? There's not enough space for kind of diversity to actually kind of flourish. Anyone want to come in on that? Really good point, Andrew.
I'm happy to get the ball rolling, and maybe others would talk from a more personal experience. So I absolutely agree with you, and I think it's incredibly problematic. And I think what is at the bottom of this approach is a business model that prioritize, profit over people in like a very, very, very big kind of brushstroke, profit over people and planet, right? Really. I would say that just in general, kind of going back to the way that I see it and trying to undo it, we have a very, very masculine and heteronormative system in place, right? And that system prioritizes competition, and it prioritizes rationality, and it prioritizes this ethos part that we cannot really show vulnerability or care or emotionality, or we might be able to share them, but they are considered to be soft skills. They're considered to be kind of, in addition, something that we might do a training on at some point because there's like a harassment case or whatever. Really, I think what we're trying to move and change, and ideally also create businesses that do this from the get-go, is to create businesses that prioritize care, that prioritize emotionality, that prioritize well-being from the get-go. And these things are as important as the profit that we give our shareholders, and as important as, winning the competition and all of that. I mean, these things should work hand in hand. I think what we have right now is kind of a blind competition that puts a lot of people behind. But it comes to diversity even more so, because there's kind of like a cross wires in terms of what we expect people who don't conform to gender roles and gender presentation. So I think there's kind of like a double and triple discrimination and lack of really benefiting from diversity.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Really good points. Christian?
I totally agree with what you said. To jump in, I think part of the problem is, again, not to bring everything back to data, but there's increasingly studies that show when, for example, you put impact at the heart of your investment decisions, not just investability, is it going to make money, that long-term profits actually are higher. So totally to your point, starting to put at the heart of investment decisions, not just like the quickest returns, actually leads to wider benefits long-term from obviously an economic perspective, but from the founder's perspective, but it's more sustainable and they're not burning themselves out. And part of the problem, at least from my experience talking with queer founders, and in general, I think this is a broad brush comment, but within the DE&I space, often there are certain queer leaders who may get to a certain level and then they exhibit similar behaviors of like the heteronormative group who have got there, which are more competitive than collaborative. And that's a really big problem. And the longer I've worked in this industry, I'd like to say, quote, the higher I've gotten, the more collaborative I see it, but it ends up being the more competitive. And I think this is well, you can put it back to, it's a wider legacy problem within like the hustle and corporate world, that the more experience you get or the more you work in this, you have to be more competitive instead of collaborative. And I think that's like gets to the core of one of the issues. There's not enough queer role models out there, and of those out there, a lot of them, I can't say again because the data's not there, but a lot of them exhibit behaviors of a bit of that toxic, overly heteronormative and not exactly conducive to collaboration type of culture. So yeah, to the original point, I think we need more role models who exhibit those behaviors. And I still think we're at the early stage of DE&I across all these spaces that is collaborative, impact focus and like queer focus, because currently a lot of the stuff happening in there is still very much like, how can I put it? Just bland and very standard. Like you see the same role models and they like sink into the normal wider corporate culture, which isn't traditionally as healthy.
Thanks, Christian. Did anyone else want to come back to Andrew's point here? Brilliant. Andrew, did you want to come back to any of those points?
Yeah, I just want to almost just pick up what Christian said, and just if I can just extend the point a little bit, just to ask a question from one, actually to the whole audience, but it's this idea of identity, whether within the LGBTQ plus community, are there different experiences, the extent to which you can just express yourself? So I'm stretching here and obviously looking for direct experiences here, but so for example, Christian, in your observation, have you seen gay or queer men just exhibiting gay and queer identities, or do they somewhat sort of hold back and in a sense enjoy, can I lapse into the stereotype of sort of male privilege, if you like, which is open to gay men, but it's not open to other members of the LGBTQ community? And so there's an issue here where, you know, being themselves is problematic, but they do have some choices. Am I making any sense, or perhaps
No, that makes total sense. I know where you're coming from. So I guess from my experience generally, at least in this space, which is part of the reason I set up iCube, a lot of the initiatives that interlock with the startup world are male 1, 2 white, and 3 very Western focused. And there are attempts, there's obviously acknowledgement of the need for wider DE&I efforts, which is intersectional investing, which isn't really gotten to the stage as impact investing has gotten in like the sustainability world. But I still think the efforts are quite tokenistic, and there's probably, and a lot of it may be subconscious, but tunnel vision from those queer gay leaders that are mostly men and often part of the white majority. So without giving names, I went to a couple of events recently and just talking about like queer in venture capital and queerness. I got a lot of vibes from certain people being like, oh, queer, I'm not sure about that. Like, why do we need queer? And not understanding the history behind it. And secondly, even discussing intersectionality and having some people say, oh, what's intersectionality? So little things like this, and this is within the LGBTQ plus community. So I do think it's still got a long way to go. I'd say within the corporate space, it's probably more evolved. Like venture capital in a way is still like, can be like finance in the 80s. They're getting there, but only in the last, I'd say, not even in the last couple of years. There's a lot of focus on like Black founders, female founders, starting to be on LGBTQ plus founders, but they still don't understand how they interlock. That intersectionality piece, I think, is really like early stages, and people may not see how it links to the present day. They think, oh, intersectionality, Black women of color in the 80s in New York, and they don't see how it interlinks into like the wider business world. So yes, to your point, those gay or queer men, they're trying, again, I'm talking of a blanket statement, but it's not gotten to the extent in other spaces. And there's still a lot of, I think, just basic awareness that needs to happen. And I don't think a lot of it is intentional. A lot of it is probably subconscious. So that goes into the whole like unconscious bias training and just having more faces and conversations about it. So it ends up being on their agenda.
Thanks. That's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Any other points on that, and any other questions as well? Graham.
Thank you. Kind of following on from that point, actually, about the extent to which people have to feel they have to hide their identity. I worked with a startup that's in year 1, which has actually now become an international business. So it's moved into 2 countries, moving into a 3rd. But that was set up by a pair of queer women who are very good friends of mine. They are partners, and I'm so proud of them for what they've achieved, but I also feel really heartbroken for them sometimes, because the extent to which they really seem to feel they have to hide the fact of their identity and the fact that they're partners, and the discrimination that I've seen them face, actually more primarily, I think, because they're women in a very strongly male-led sector. So we've had lots of conversations about the fact that who they are is such an asset to the business, and whether they could make more use of that. But those conversations I think usually lead to an idea of actually having to keep that quiet, and almost the business succeeding more because they don't talk about that as an asset. And I'm just really curious to understand other people's kind of stories and experiences of to what extent they faced that as well, to what extent they've had to felt that they can be honest about it sometimes and have to hide it other times, and any kind of advice around that. Because I'd love to kind of support them more through it, but obviously it's entirely their decision, but I'd love to support them to kind of be more open about that.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Graham. And maybe you can come to Jaron and Elizabeth as well. But just in terms of the numbers from the kind of limited research and knowledge on this that I have done, around a third of founders choose to keep their sexual orientation hidden, which is extraordinarily high. And like you said, Graham, really, really sad. Jaron, do you want to come in first, and then Elizabeth, I'll come over to you as well.
Yeah. So for context, so now I talk about my sexuality all the time because of what I'm working on, queer mental health. But in my previous company, which was venture backed, we are a B2B hiring platform. And yes, so to your point, I seldom brought it up. And I have the privilege in the sense that if I just kind of keep mum, no one would know I'm queer unless I come out, and I have the privilege. And as a cisgender Asian man, I am not really a minority in the tech industry. So at the same time, I think there's two sides to this. So if you do come out, very often, I think most people will be okay. Some people will be taken aback slightly because they're not sure how to react, or like what their reaction should be, even though they are perfectly accepting of things. But at the same time, even if someone dismisses you secretly behind your back because of your sexuality or your gender, there's really often no way you would know. Which is why I think what people like Christian are doing, what Yael is doing, what all of you are doing is really important, in the sense that we need to foster a lot more resources, a lot more capital, and a lot more knowledge and self-awareness about this. So there is greater access out there. But now I am always visibly kind of queer. I will mention it because I don't want someone who is homophobic or on my own cap table as well. And to Christian's point on, impact-focused companies being better for profitability, I think a big part of that comes from the personal convictions of the founder. So if you're working on something which you have a very strong personal experience to, and something which drives you, which you have personally lived, that I think also makes you a better investment candidate, because you would go a longer way than someone who's just in it for the money. But right now, I think what society selects and look out for is, this archetype of what a person in investment should look like or then speak like. Because often you can't, for me, it was quite easy to kind of assimilate in the tech bro culture, so to speak. But then some people might feel excluded because you also don't know the language or the vernacular, or how to act in a certain way, or things like that. I think I digress a little bit, but
no, that's great, and I thank you as well for being a role model as well. I think sometimes the kind of role models that are churned out are the same old kind of Peter Thiel and Joel Simkai and Tim Cook, and actually to have people that are kind of relatable as well, I think is something that will really hopefully encourage and inspire aspiring founders at LSE and kind of broader to actually feel confident enough to be able to talk authentically about their experiences. So thanks, Jaron. And Elizabeth, I know you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, I think it's linked to that. But so I come from, I work at the LSE. That's why I'm here representing Spectrum. So I'm really not familiar with the insights of the entrepreneurial world or anything. And everything I know is very what I've gotten from seeing how people act. And to me, maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like you really need to be very self-confident to start a new company. You have to pitch your idea, you have to present yourself, you have to expose yourself a lot. So obviously, what you explained, Jaron, if you've struggled with parts of your identity throughout your life, you have a burden of of maybe low self-esteem, or you have a load that you're carrying with you that I guess impacts you also when you present yourself in front of others, even if you are talking about your company that you have a passion for. So I was wondering whether any of you have had access to trainings or resources to kind of deal with that. Obviously, Jaron, your company now is trying to, I guess, address that gap, but I am wondering whether there's anything specific in your world, your sector of entrepreneurship that addresses that, and or any resources that you found helpful for that. I'm just curious to know how you've dealt with those issues, if you've found that you have them, of course.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So anyone wants to come in and answer such a helpful question? And Graham, there's a question. Oh, you've answered it. Brilliant. Okay, please, you guys.
Yeah, I have a few recommendations, real quick ones. So first, of course, LSE Generate. So LJ was the first person to ever believe in my first business, Artisan and Fox, from 7 years ago when I was a student. So there's that. But there's both, I think, resources for underrepresented founders. So there's a pre-accelerator for people of color and also queer people called RISE. I'm part of the RISE 2022. There's a few impact accelerators like Unrest. But it's also important, I think, for queer founders to take up space in mainstream spaces. And a lot of mainstream spaces, while sometimes they might still struggle with the awareness that things are not equal, it's still important for us to be confident, as you said, and also not self-sabotage and just go into those spaces and take up room. So I was part of Antler London, which is a program to match founders together, and then they invest in you at an early stage. There's great communities like the On Deck Fellowship, which is also very queer inclusive, and they do a lot of work across different impact themes and angles. So yeah, that's for my end. But if anyone would like to speak or learn about getting to tech or starting a business as a queer founder, you're very welcome to reach out to me personally as well. I'll leave my email address in the chat.
Yeah, I think this question I also talk to my communities, because they also have, it's not a startup, they have a project, or they just want to do something, do some campaign, but they don't know where they can look for help. I suggest there are many of space. You just search. You definitely can search something you may be suitable for your needs. And because why they had this concept, in Chinese content, they will think many media censorship on website when they leave China. So they were here. Actually, you are free. You can search anything. You just ask someone, you just talk to someone. And for me, I'm thinking Queer China UK can create such safe space, something like how to support their startup, how to support their project. But it's not our focus. We still focus on museum, art, festival, something like that. But if we have this space, they can find the person they trust. They can come out, they can share their experience. I think this space I can create. And then other things also related to the previous question about the whether the queer founder had to their identity, had to hide their identities. Because this was also my teams we suffer from. Before them, they worry about if I put their profile in the website, whether their family, their relative will see their their profiles. So they worry about this. That's why they don't want to put in a leadership position. They're willing to freelance or just as a participant, but they are worried that all this identity limited their leadership program. But I think the pandemic maybe brought me some opportunities. Because the pandemic, they see many Chinese was bitten, suffer from this hate crime. They are my community actually, they are very angry. I think this angry may empower them. They know the visibility is important. Otherwise, you may be the next one suffer from such violence. So the pandemic bring many challenges to our staff, but still bring us some opportunity. And during the pandemic, I found my teams become very utilized. They want to do something, maybe not just for LGBT, for Chinese or for Chinese LGBT, and all this experience made them realize the visibility is important. But of course, as a founder, I think what I want to do is I want to create such safe space or supportive network for my community.
Thanks, Jaron. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Comments? I think one thing I'm super interested in as well is everything that has been being done during these kind of months, History Month and just Pride Month generally. It is the great opportunity that it is to be much more open-minded and have that approach. But is there a feeling that some of this is a little bit of, especially within the startup world, a bit of window dressing and just kind of flying the Pride flag? And actually, are there startups that you see or organizations that aren't just you feel doing it for kind of marketing purposes, but actually making some real kind of tangible changes in their own backyard? Can you think of any really good examples of that above and beyond the nice stuff that you guys are doing, obviously?
I guess to just talk candidly to it without giving examples, like in terms of lessons learned and what to look out for. A very simple one is like post LGBT History Month. So after February and after June, what are these companies doing? Does their LinkedIn logo change from rainbow to non-rainbow? Also, when they are, and this is a small subtle change which shows they've thought about it, when they are pushing out information related to Pride, is it the standard rainbow flag? Is it the Progress Pride flag? Do they understand the interlock with being Black and queer, POC and queer, trans as well? Small things like that, I think, especially younger generations looking to jobs or founding their own companies or to investors, these are the subtle things that would stand out for them. And maybe 5-6 years ago, companies and entrepreneurs could have got away with it. There's a rainbow flag. Oh, it's fine. They're inclusive. Whereas now, like, just having a rainbow flag, even if you are active, may even be considered pinkwashing because you're not fully engaged in the depth of the community. And the only last thing I would say is, and the reason I'm lacking examples is because to be honest, I haven't seen it done super well on this last point, which is advocacy. So outside of their 4 office walls, and outside of what they're doing generally in the venture space, are they actually investing back into the community? Which charities are they partnered with? And what do they do beyond the business case, essentially?
That's great. Thank you. Oh, Jaron, yes, go for it.
Oh, no, you can continue, LJ.
No, or anyone else? On that note, I think I've got a question just in terms of, I'm just listening to you guys. I'm just thinking, gosh, we can do so much better as the team at Generate. We run female founders retreats, and we obviously have the code of conduct that has helped us so much and just allowed us to be really accountable to the kind of activities and initiatives that they're doing. In terms of the kind of activities that we could roll out within Generate, obviously using you guys as a brainstorming session here, but just not just Generate, but kind of the wider university ecosystem, because as Jaron mentioned, like for a lot of people, this is the moment that they do come out, and it's a really vulnerable time. I think for a lot of students, it's the most formative kind of stage of their development. Is there anything you think the university ecosystem could do better, and kind of as a leader who I hope is very kind of committed to diversity in the workplace, how can we continue to create that culture, especially with the kind of within the entrepreneurial space, to ensure that the founders can be entirely kind of present in the fullness of themselves, really?
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of things can do, like just like simple starting point, for example, added cultural sensitivities or like LGBT sensitivities into like in all department centers. So you maybe have some like policies or have some maybe like officer, they actually do something. They also can collect the feedback from the student, from like the teachers, from all the people. And the second ones I'm thinking is about also the safe space. Because when I studied in LSE, I also went to like other university. like I found like for the Chinese LGBT, like why I didn't join this LGBT gathering. The first one, maybe this space is all like alcohol, have alcohol. Maybe it's not very suitable for Chinese or EA's background. So that's why I don't want to like go to have alcohol space. I also we have a sense of like danger, something like that. And another is create like more like not alcohol space, maybe okay. And then other is one of our team member, and she's an undergraduate student, and I encourage her to establish a society. Now she's success. She she established the ESEA, like East and Southeast Asia's queer society in her university. So I think that's great. Like you can, you are not just the victim. You can like do something to promote the progress. And as this society, you can just like link all the professor or link the mental health center, link all the resource to promote them. They can do something. They can all know what's the need from Chinese LGBT international student communities. And that's what quite basic things I'm doing. But I think other speakers, they maybe had more like profile or very like experience to share.
Thanks, Jaron. That was really helpful. Anyone else?
I think in general, and I'm kind of, wearing two hats here, so I'm not going to talk about what Generate can do, but I think in general, what is really, really important is to incorporate these plans into the kind of bigger business plan. Because often what is happening is kind of like an afterthought. It's like, oh no, it's, this and that date, and it's time to change the flag or whatever and put in some rainbows. And it really is important to, as Christian was mentioning earlier, to, keep the work going beyond, LGBT month and stuff like that, and really incorporate it into linking with the business plan of an organization or a startup or a VC or whatever it is. So it's about measurable benchmarks. It's about strategy. It's about prioritizing. It's about really creating a plan and following through and creating an accountability link that goes all the way to leadership. So I think without this, it's always going to be a form of tokenism in all kinds of ways. So what is really, really important is to really smartly incorporate it into planning.
One last point to make as well. I think on Yael's point on there's a new date, you go do something new. It gets very stressful to always have to do all those things. But I think what we can realize is that it's all very much interlinked. There are shared elements of trauma, repression, and obstacles, for all these different causes, and that's stopping us from being our most authentic selves and being able to live up to our own potential. So I think what we'll suggest is we can't just operate in our own silos. There's a lot of linkages and intersectionality between everything. So, and LSE is very much a melting pot for different cultures, ethnicities, all the different causes we're fighting for, but there are links between people fighting for people who are displaced from conflict, and fighting for people who are, I guess, displaced from maybe mentally or from their own communities, being rejected because of who they are, because of their gender identity or sexuality, and there's all linkages there. I think part of that is recognizing that in the overall business mission is and incorporate that all in the day-to-day, instead of just being like, this is the month for this and then we do this, because I think it does get very stressful for everyone to remember all the dates, and not everyone is going to.
Thanks, Jaron. We've got just a few minutes left, so I just wondered if anyone had some final thoughts, questions, comments again.
Just a final thought. I mean, there's so much positivity as well as energy in the room, so to speak, today. But also, it's amazing what has been done over a relatively short period of time. And I wonder whether there are real positives. And I know that there are major problem areas to confront in this whole field. But I also wonder if there's a great deal of positives that we've underplayed. I mean, simply, for example, mobilising the community, getting community sites and magazines and art festivals and all sorts of things up and running, which are not widely known or broadcast outside the particular section that may have sort of initiated it. So, you know, what are the positives that can be played on? And again, back to the points made about intersectionality, if you think about ways that the Black community sort of really found its way by, you know, through just leveraging its own talents in a way, just making the most of that. And I wonder whether more could be done just by seizing hold of those and getting that message out there.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant call to action. Thanks, Andrew. Any other points?
Just echoing that, collaboration and solidarity. I think we talk about it a lot, especially on the latter, solidarity between our communities, but sometimes the collaboration doesn't really exist there. And I think we need to, as individuals, always think of what is in the community's best interest above any ego. And obviously, we're all very passionate. We're all trailblazers. We all, you know, have a fire inside of us to make a difference. But I think it's really important to sometimes step back and think, okay, what is best right now for the community? Who else can I bring along this journey with me? Because I often find, and this is always often the case within the industry, sometimes there's crossover, sometimes there's not conflict, but there can be overlapping. And I think the more that we do things together and the more that we connect the dots, the stronger we are. Because really, we all have the same, we all want the same outcome. Sometimes we're all putting in different inputs and we have different outputs, but the outcome is always the same. To give a very LSE causes of things perspective, one outcome, but there may not be complete alignment on the inputs and outputs, which I think we can get better at. And yeah.
Thanks, Christian. I cannot think of a time where collaboration and solidarity was more important right now. So thank you so much. Any final points?
Yeah, I just, you know, to close, I wanted to say thank you very much for everyone for being here. It was a great event. I wish this is just the start of a conversation, because it felt like way more can be said, and I would love to, you know, hear more about this at LSE. So, you know, LJ, I think you have an opportunity here to talk way more about the LGBTQ plus space and entrepreneurial initiatives. And I thought it was very interesting that you talked a lot about the intersectionality, and that's something that we're also taking on board at the LSE. And as I was saying at the beginning, the staff networks are realizing that what Christian was just saying, that we are all striving for the same outcome. So we want to join forces and share experiences and realize that we have a lot in common, and that we can join forces to make the LSE a better place for diversity, basically. So I really hope you all can join that effort from your spaces. And I don't know, I found it was a really interesting and cool conversation. So thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks again for approaching us to run this. I'm totally kind of energized by this. It was a really exciting conversation. I have a massive to-do list on my book, and I'm sure you guys do too. I can't wait to share this recording with the broader LSE community, and I will absolutely be back in touch with all of you to come up with a plan. Thank you so much, Jaron and Quiyan and Yael and Christian and you guys for taking the time out of your super busy day to join us. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much for all the opportunities that you shared, the resources, the experiences. We've got work to do, but I think we have an amazing group of people that are going to make that happen, I am sure. So thank you so much, everyone. Take care of yourselves, and we will be in touch. Thank you so much.